As she sipped her coffee, Lila felt a familiar sense of anticipation rumbling within her. It was more than just her typical Aries restlessness. She was daring, bold by nature, always ready to chase after what she wanted, but this time, it wasn't just about a job or a new adventure. This was something deeper, more personal. And, like most matters of the heart, it was just a bit terrifying. It was Caleb. Sweet, steadfast Caleb, with his calm gaze and his grounded ways. They'd been seeing each other for almost a year, and she knew he'd probably make the most perfect partner. He was the one who brought her tea when she was stressed, who listened without judgment when she went on a passionate rant about whatever her latest cause was. He knew her quirks, her fire, her intensity, and somehow, he loved her for it. But the problem wasn't Caleb. It was her. As an Aries, Lila had always loved her independence. Freedom was everything to her, and she guarded it fiercely. Caleb was wonderful, but the idea of commitment, even with someone like him, felt like walking straight into a cage. Her mind flitted to thoughts of her single life, the freedom to go wherever she wanted, whenever she pleased. Wasn't that what had always made her happy? But as she sat there, her eyes drifting to the framed photos on her bookshelf, memories started weaving themselves together. The trip to the coast last summer, where they'd spent hours collecting seashells and laughing until their sides hurt. The lazy mornings wrapped in his arms, the unspoken understanding that sometimes silence said everything. Caleb had been there through the highs and lows, the quick decisions and the impulsive mistakes. He'd seen her wildest side and still stood by her. And yet, just as she felt herself softening, a flicker of fear rose within her. She didn't want to lose herself. She'd seen it happen to friends, seen how they'd traded their freedom and spontaneity for the predictability of commitment. What if that happened to her? What if she woke up one day and realized she'd lost that spark that made her feel alive? Taking a deep breath, Lila reminded herself that these thoughts were just fears. They weren't truths, and they didn't have to control her. But they were loud, louder than she wanted to admit. It was easier to convince herself that maybe Caleb wasn't the one, that maybe there was some grand, fiery love waiting for her just around the corner. Yet, she couldn't shake the thought that this was her usual defense. She was so used to running at the first sign of commitment. In all the relationships she'd been in, there was always a moment where she'd hit this wall and chosen to leave. She wondered if she'd been losing something precious every time she made that decision. As her mind wandered, she thought back to a conversation she'd had with her mom just last week. Her mom had always been her confidant, the one who'd understood her impulsive nature and supported her fiercely. Lila, love isn't about losing yourself. It's about finding someone who lets you be even more of who you are, she'd said with a knowing smile. And sometimes, the very thing you're scared of might be what's been missing all along. That idea lingered, gently shifting the weight of her fear. What if this wasn't about losing her independence, but about finding something greater? What if Caleb wasn't asking her to give up her freedom but inviting her to share it with him? With her mind racing, she picked up her phone and decided to call him. The sound of his voice grounded her, a steady reminder of everything he brought into her life. She knew that what they had was worth fighting for, but it was a battle within herself that she had to face. Over dinner that night, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the words caught somewhere between her mind and her lips. Caleb noticed her hesitation and, in that gentle way of his, reached across the table, taking her hand. Lila, whatever you're feeling, you don't have to go through it alone. Just talk to me, he said softly, his voice full of patience. Those words unlocked something in her. She didn't have to be the lone warrior, always fighting to protect herself from imagined cages. Caleb wasn't asking her to be anyone but herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most liberating thing of all. They sat there, deep into the night, as she shared her fears and her dreams, her hopes and her doubts. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run. She felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, choosing someone who didn't want to stifle her fire but cherish it. The weeks that followed felt like uncharted territory. She was stepping into something new, but for once, she was doing it without reservations. The doubts still came and went, but she learned to recognize them as just passing thoughts, not truths she had to live by. When she looked at Caleb, she felt her heart race with a blend of excitement and peace. He was her partner, her teammate, the one who wanted her to reach for the stars without ever pulling her back down to earth. And in choosing him, she'd chosen herself, too, the woman who could love fiercely and live freely, all at once. By letting go of her fear and embracing her courage, Lila realized that she wasn't giving up anything. She was stepping into a new version of herself, a bolder, braver one who understood that love wasn't a cage, but a choice. And it was the most beautiful choice she'd ever made.